call. There may be a moment of feedback. What you should just do is mute your own lines, and then when you go through and say who you are, unmute to do that. So in the room right now, you've got myself, Ethan Handelman from NHC. You've got
Rebecca King, NHC.
Chris Estes, NHC.
And because it's a beautiful sunny day, no one wanted to come over to NHC and sit in the conference room. So we are alone here. But we're also joined by Jerry Passendorf of Loveline Technologies, who will be our main presenter today once we get through some policy updates. So what I'm going to do now, hey, Jerry, sorry, I forgot you were unmuted already.
It's okay.
Okay, so you notice you heard a little bit of background there? Right, good. People are muting the phone. Thank you. That's exactly what we need. I see that there are a bunch of folks on the phone. If you would like, let's start with Allison Charette. Allison, why don't you unmute, introduce yourself, and then go back on mute, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay, hi, this is Allison Charette from Enterprise. Did that work?
It did. I heard you loud and clear. Someone is got it on beeping. Bye. It was necessary. We will mute everyone again. But Carlos, why don't you go next?
Sure. This is Carlos Alcazar with the National Community Stabilization Trust.
Great. Dawn?
Dawn Sackmo with the National Community Stabilization Trust based in Chicago.
Excellent. Glenn?
Hi, Glenn Gallo and Greg Sikorsky with NCSHA here.
Hey, guys. Welcome. Jen Leonard? You might still be muted, Jen. Okay, well, no worries. I know Jennifer Leonard's on the webinar, so that's good. Jessica? Okay. Well, I know Jessica Anderson from LISC is on. Joe Ferguson?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, John White?
Hey, John White from Rebuilding Together.
Great. Hey, John. Oliver?
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
All right. Well, I hear folks are getting on online, and that's good. Patricia?
The access code you entered is invalid. You entered 7632892. Please re-enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Yep, I can tell we're all learning the technology, which is fine. I've done so myself. I see Shannon Ross on. Shannon, do you want to say hi?
Welcome to the webinar. Please enter as an attendee in listen-only mode.
Actually, it's already 10. We're going to hit you. There we go. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. I know that was slightly more painful than the usual conference call introduction process. I apologize for that. We are still working with this technology. I am hopeful that we can get there. Let's start with policy updates. I know folks will be dialing in as we go and joining the webinar. I will say if you're on the phone already and have not clicked on the link that Rebecca sent around, please do, because after I stop talking about boring policy stuff, Jerry Passendorf is going to talk about really interesting property level stuff in Detroit and elsewhere, so that part you want to be online for. But we will start with policy updates. First issue we're going to talk about is budget. Rebecca's giving me the nod that I'm remembering the agenda correctly. So those of you who have been watching developments in Washington know that both the House and the Senate have passed their budget resolutions. They are different. So they have not been reconciled. They have not created one concurrent resolution passed by both houses. That would be the next step. For those who need some context, the budget resolution is not a law. It does not get signed by the President. It does not have the force of law. But what it does do is set up the rest of the process for the year in several ways. First is it's part of setting the allocations for each of the committees to do the appropriations work, right? It's the top line numbers. How much is the government going to spend this year? It also sets up a path toward what's called budget reconciliation. This is a process near the end of the year, right, after appropriations has happened, where the committees get instructions from the budget committee to reconcile what appropriations has done with the overall budget. That leads to a bill, one big, usually, bill that can pass through both the House and the Senate in a really expedited way. There's no points of order you can do. It takes pretty much just a simple majority. I think it's 60 votes in the Senate, but it's a low threshold, right? You can get it through a lot easier than most other things. And that does go to the president and can be signed and can have the force of law. So down the road, this budget resolution could be important. I will say it's been many years since we've had an actual budget resolution passed. So we're not there yet. There are big differences between the House and the Senate, particularly around defense spending. There is real tension within the Republican Party that controls each of those houses of Congress about whether to spend more on defense or to cut spending overall. One of the things that housing needs to be mindful and, frankly, a little bit worried about is that the one way to thread that needle for the Republicans is, cut things other than defense, and housing falls into the other than defense discretionary category. There's been a lot of good advocacy around housing and transportation that Rebecca will talk about, around non-defense discretionary spending overall. I think the size, just in comparison to the mandatory side of the budget and to defense of non-defense discretionary spending, makes it harder to cut it enough to get where some of the Congress would want to go. But we do need to remain vigilant and involved as this comes through. After the recess is when the House and the Senate will reconvene to aim for that concurring resolution. That should be, the goal is April 15th. We'll see if they hit it. But watch for updates from us and from others of our partners on that. Rebecca, do you want to talk about the 302B allocation?
Yeah, so as Ethan just mentioned, the FY 2016 budget negotiations are underway, and so as they begin their work, we really think it's important for appropriators to hear from the housing community about the importance of a strong 302B allocation for the THUD subcommittee. And just to recap,
yeah, what's that
302B allocation sets the THUD spending cap. So a higher cap means increased investments for housing and community development. And which higher cap sounds like a little idealistic given this difficult budget year, but it's also why it's so important to continue our advocacy. So the Campaign for Housing and Community Development Funding, of which NHC is a member, recently completed its 302B sign-on letter campaign. So over 3,000 national, state, and local organizations signed the letter. It was a mix of transportation, housing, and community development. And the letter basically just said, please maintain or increase the 302B allocation for THUD. And the letter was really powerful because of this strong united voice and this message to lawmakers that this community of over 3,000 organizations really thinks this is important. So we can provide copies of that letter. It's a really nice visual because of all the sign-ons. It's about 75 pages. And it's something that as you do your own advocacy on the Hill, you can refer to the rest of the year to try and maintain the profile of housing and the need for that allocation.
Did they sort the sign-ons by state again this year?
They did sort by state.
So that's really helpful if you're going into a particular visit and say, hey, here's where our state is represented in this effort. That can make an impact.
Yeah, so that's how that went.
Okay, and I will say the other bit I would add around the 302B is that the number will probably be bad, right? The budget resolution is likely to be quite constrained. However, later in the year, if there manages to be a deal that can relax or replace the sequestration caps, that's an opportunity to create, in effect, a new larger 302B, and that's where this advocacy will pay off. So it matters now, it needs to be heard now, but it will also matter later in the year. So this is one of those things where the work that has gone in early can pay off later, potentially. Lots of ifs, but all important ifs. Let me talk a little bit about our broadband connectivity initiative, which some of you may have seen in our Washington Wire this week. We brought together, with help from a bunch of great partners, the Connectivity Working Group, which aims to have broadband connectivity in a cost-effective, affordable way in all affordable housing. Our group has really pursued two different avenues to help make that happen. One is on the research side. So there's one research brief that's at the printers now from our Center for Housing Policy that documents the need for in-home broadband connectivity and computing equipment among low-income families. And there are one or two others forthcoming about the impacts of that on things like employment and education and family self-sufficiency, as well as some of the best practices for delivering that connectivity at a property level. The other thread that we're pursuing is advocacy around a set of policy recommendations that the working group has developed and that we are going to be taking to policymakers in the administration, in some of the independent regulatory agencies, potentially on the Hill a little bit, to recognize that this is a big effort. It's not something that HUD or USDA will do on their own or within their own budget, but there are a bunch of things that those two agencies, as well as the FCC and Congress itself, can do to really make this a reality and ensure that the folks who live in affordable housing aren't disconnected from the economic life that many of us take for granted. I mean, whether it's making doctor's appointments or answering job ads or letting the kids do their homework. I mean, mine regularly elbow me out of the way and say, Daddy, I need to get to my Google Drive. So it's becoming a fact of life, but for a lot of low-income families, it's just not present. It's not present in the home or in a way that they can use. And there really are some interesting cost-effective models for providing it at a property level, not just a plug in the wall, but the computing equipment and the digital literacy training that make the connectivity really relevant to people's economic lives. So we will send around with the notes the policy brief and the research brief. We are accepting sign-ons on a rolling basis. A whole bunch of groups have already come on board to support this, and we're really excited. A lot of them are out in California, and that's thanks in no small part to the folks at the California Emerging Technologies Fund who have to support this effort. But there is room for lots more, and we would love to see more people join in. So take a look at them. Shoot Rebecca an email. Shoot me an email. Give us a call. Join in if you can. Circulate it if you can't, even if you can't, and help us make this bear some fruit. So I'm going to pause there. We'll check. There is a question and answer box, right? It's labeled questions in your webinar interface. Given all of the feedback we had on the phone, I'm not going to unmute right now, although we will try and do it after Jerry's presentation. If you do have questions, though, it's great to type them into that box, and I will make sure we try and hit all of those in the time available, and as well as some questions that I'm sure I will have and others will have. We will, like I said, try and do the unmuting thing later on once Jerry's presented. If the feedback gets problematic, we'll go back on mute and we'll just do it through the Q&A box. But I want to push the envelope on this technology and make it the conversation as interactive as possible. There's real benefit to hearing each other's voices. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jerry Paffendorf, who I met for the first time at our Detroit Revitalization Forum that I talked about on the last call. He is the CEO of Loveland Technologies, and they are doing truly amazing cutting-edge work developing nearly real-time database of all the parcels of land in Detroit, and I know they're working in other cities. The power of this for policymaking and policy implementation is huge, and I don't want to steal any of Jerry's thunder here. I'm going to let him tell you all about it, but I'll just say I'm incredibly impressed by what he's doing, and when I found out he could join us on this call, I was really excited. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jerry, and he can tell us more about what Loveland is doing.
Sure. Thank you. That's very kind. Good afternoon, everybody. And Ethan and Rebecca, you guys can see my screen okay here?
Yes, we can.
Is that correct? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to try to keep this short. Some of you may have seen or heard about the Motor City Mapping Project already. Some of you have So I'm going to talk through the work that we've done in Detroit and then talk about some brand new things that I don't think anybody's really heard about yet, because we just sort of redesigned the Loveland website about 10 days ago to focus on the ambitious goal of trying to put every single property in America online, every single parcel of property online, and to survey every property using a similar kind of model to what we did in Detroit, but allowing people to do that using Google Street View over their computers. So I'll kind of get from Detroit to there as quickly as possible, and then maybe we can have a chat about questions, and you know, I want to hear where you guys want to direct me. So long story short, Loveland Technologies is based in Detroit. There's about 20 of us here, most in Detroit, a few in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we started in about 2009 kind of asking questions at first about why do things in Detroit look the way they do? What are, you know, the mythical $500 houses that you find here? Where do they come from? How can there be so many vacant properties, and why does nobody seem to understand what to do with them, who owns them, what the best ways to make policy decisions about making effective reuse of them, and helping people who are having a hard time staying in the city, accessing quality housing, have a better, easier job of doing that. And being technologists and people who invent for the internet, we got our hands on a shapefile of all the parcels and properties in the city, loaded it onto the internet, and immediately became intoxicated with this idea of kind of building X-ray glasses for being able to see every property in the city, and to be able to magically look at things like who owns everything, and how is everything zoned, and what's at foreclosure risk, and what was recently sold, and this whole world of information, which has kind of been around and siloed in different places, but certainly not made easily accessible or visual to people over a medium like the internet. So a little bit over a year ago, based on that work, we got tapped by a newly formed blight removal task force in Detroit, who at the behest of the federal government, who was trying to figure out a way to help Detroit to get on top of some of its large systematic problems, identified one of those problems as quote-unquote blight. So vacant properties, dangerous properties, fire damaged properties, dumping, things in the architectural and spatial landscape that need to be fixed. And one of the things that came up when we were asked if we could do anything to help, what would we do, was kind of going like, okay, everybody knows there's a lot of this stuff in Detroit, but nobody knows exactly how much, where, how it's changing over time, and therefore nobody can get specific, and therefore nobody can try to budget properly, nobody can plan properly, nobody can see the dynamics, so we can expect, even have something of a sense of where we're going to be in a few years if we try different approaches. So what we put out was, okay, we're crazy people. We can build software. We have experience mapping parcels. How about we actually send Detroiters to go and visit every single property in the city of Detroit, photograph it, enter condition and occupancy information, and make a picture of the city that's never been seen before, that we can then share not just with the decision makers, but also share with the public as well, you know, and try to build something like a Wikipedia, and that there's an updatable database of condition, land use, and occupancy that's accessible to all Detroiters and elected leaders and city employees. So we did that last winter, winter of 2013 to 2014. The results and the updates since then are available on motorcitymapping.com, which is the web page and screen you see here on the screen share. Essentially, it's a map of interface of Detroit, where you can either view the city by neighborhoods, by zip code, census tracts, council districts, funding zones, different views, and see an overall, at the level you're looking at, how many of what kinds of properties, in what kinds of conditions, and in what kinds of, in the case of Detroit, various categories of being in distress are there. And so, as an example here, I'm going to jump down to a neighborhood view, and inside of this container, you'll see the stats and the data and the findings update on the right-hand side of the screen, and you'll actually see at this level that these containers contain every single parcel of property in the city. And if I want to, I can look at it through satellite or just kind of look at this abstract view with addresses. And if I click on a property, I'm going to see the most recent photograph. And again, we have a range of when things were last updated, from some that go back a little over a year now to some that were updated as of yesterday. It depends on the area and the level of change that's being experienced. And what I can do here within any neighborhood is say, show me everything of X. So if I want to see within the Grand Meyer neighborhood, I want to see all the structures that have fire damage, I can actually pull up X-ray glasses for that type of view, and I can go around and I can explore all the properties that need to be worked on because they have this kind of problem. You know, as you can see here, here's a recently updated one, unfortunately, is property that burned down just a little bit earlier this year. And on the topic of fire, it's actually one of the most, very unfortunately, dynamic data sets in the city. In Detroit right now, we have between 300 and 400 significant structure fires every month. And we actually have a crew here out of the office that listens to the fire scanner and tries to go and update all of them within the within 48 hours. So that for the fire department, for the public, and for city planners, you can see that. Here's a view I queued up where, looking at a neighborhood, I click to take a look at the structure occupancy, and at a very quick glance here, I can see which properties in this area are occupied and unoccupied. So everything red here is an unoccupied property. So along with the photographic evidence of why that's claimed to be the case, all the additional kind of surveying information here, and then the ability for anybody who has either new information or an issue with the information to go ahead and update the information about that property. We actually have there's a Loveland app. It was originally called Blexting, which is short for blight texting, since the first focus was on trying to identify how many things in Detroit need to be fixed. It was sort of a hunt for blight. We're currently in the process of rebranding that now just to be the Loveland app, because we don't want it to only be about blight. There's, of course, good things that also happen in Detroit, even if entropy is still sort of a dominant force. You know, we want people to be able to capture property conditions and change of all kinds, new houses, cleanups, just differences in general, so that what this tool becomes is a database of record that's user-friendly and visual, that's shared between the city government and its residents, which of course in that continuum includes the spectrum from neighborhood organizations and block clubs to real estate developers, so that everybody's got access to accurate property information that they can also feed back on. And you know, I'll show you a couple other things here at the as we explore the site, which are kind of interesting. A little bit kind of like a la Twitter or Facebook, just as far as a news feed. On the site, if you go to the tab that says Blex, you'll see a long time-stamped stream of what are the most recent properties that have been surveyed by people in the city. And unfortunately, if you look at the stream of freshness, a lot of the ones that we really try to go out to and work on every day are capturing all the properties that burned in the day or two before. And I think a lot of people on the phone are probably familiar, somewhat familiar with some of the housing conditions and dynamics in play in Detroit. And you know, I work on it all the time, so I get sort of, you know, a mix of unfortunately, you know, used to seeing it. So I don't want to harp on the just showing things that are, you know, that are burned and broken, but you know, that was part of the impetus of why we went out on the limb to make tools and to make a system that was so sort of extreme in a lot of ways. You know, extreme in the sense of, you know, let's not just try and map properties where there's problems right now. Let's map everything, and let's make a system furthermore that's updatable into the future, because, you know, things are dynamic. It's not just like, here's a picture of property right now and that's the way it's always going to be. Things will improve or get worse or change tomorrow or next week or next month. So how do we build a system that can be updated into the future? Here's a view that you're seeing, which is a color-coded map for all city-owned properties in Detroit. So everything you're seeing that is, so the key might be flipped here. Everything you're seeing here is green is a city-owned structure, and everything you're seeing that's sort of the yellowish color is a city-owned lot, which in a glance is sort of another reason why this work has been and will continue to be so important in Detroit, is that we have a situation where through people leaving the city and through foreclosure, there is just an awful lot of what I would call accidentally publicly owned land, and there has not been, and it's been pouring into city possession, so quickly by the thousands and tens of thousands every year for quite some time, that it's overwhelmed the traditional processes that the city has had to try and deal with it and plan for it, and very much as a part of the city getting healthy again in the future is having good, actionable, granular information about what's happening with these properties for planning purposes. Some of the practical ways that the information is being used at the moment, or which kind of parties in the city are using it. Like I said, it is available for everybody. So we hear information, or we hear stories from people all the time, which range from neighborhood groups use it for cleanup days to we'll get calls from people doing real estate who use it as a prospecting tool. We have, I find it pretty darn cool that we're able to service everybody on a spectrum from who I'd say who are the more locally, non-economically motivated social justice organizations who are very much advocating for fairness and equality, and on sort of one end of the spectrum, and then on the other end of the spectrum, people who are interested in investing in housing to rehab and sell and develop and all these things, and it's really given us a great feeling of kind of providing what's sort of an essential information service that's applicable to many people depending on the on what use they're pursuing, be it on the investment side or be it on the equality side, and then of course working with the cities, working with city departments. Probably our main partner in Detroit is the Detroit Land Bank, who I'm not sure how many people on the phone have been kind of following the story of what's happening with the land bank here in the city, but it's quite interesting because they went from about 3 employees about a year ago to I think almost 90 or so right now, and have kind of stepped into this position of being the ones who are taking on all of these accidentally publicly owned properties and then trying to make good decisions about, okay, which of these properties can we rehab, or which ones can we auction and to sell to somebody who could reasonably be expected to rehab it, which vacant lot should we sell to what parties. They've created some things like a side lot program, so you can buy the house, buy the lot next to the house, or buy the lot next to your house, fairly easily if you're current on taxes. And they have some programs for doing sort of blight ordinances and nuisance abatement programs. So the land bank is a heavy user of the system and making all manner of property decisions, from demolition to rehab to sales. And the fire department I mentioned earlier has started to become a user of this system. The building authority, code enforcement, pretty much any agency that touches property is using Motor City Mapping, first as a sort of a referent, but then also to collect and contribute their own information. One thing that we've begun doing for various city departments is that while we really want them to survey properties and add them into the public stream, we have some departments who are doing things like doing their own surveys of commercial properties to sort of check the viability of putting city-owned commercial properties back to sale on the open market. And so they're doing their own kind of doing their own surveys internally to try and get a sense, taking pictures of going inside of the properties, taking pictures inside of the properties to really examine conditions and do their own planning. And for the last 6 months or so, we have been trying to take the lessons of happened in Detroit, what is so cool and compelling and promising about doing this kind of parcel level surveying, making good information available to people, and thinking about how this can be applied across the entire country. And so this is the brand new stuff that I mentioned. Is we for a long time ran a website called whydon'tweownthis.com, which predated Motor City Mapping and was sort of our parcel mapping website in Detroit. And we recently retired it and moved all of our work over to a website called makeloveland.com, which is now focused on showing as much property information as we can about all 50 states in the United States of America, and with the ambition, with our sort of North Star of trying to map every single property in the country. We don't even know how many that might be. I'm not sure if it's a billion or more parcels, but some very, very large number. We actually have a team of parcel prospectors, we call them, who spend their days phone calling and emailing and Googling counties and assessor departments and GIS outfits all across the country, asking for parcel information, buying it sometimes if it's affordable. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it costs, $50. Sometimes it costs, $50,000. And so we are creating a database of where parcel level information is available, even if we can't fully access it right now. And we're trying to get as much of it online as we possibly can. So if you are on the Make Loveland website, you'll see the state map that I was just on. Everything that's colored in that is not white and transparent, that's pink or purple, has parcels inside of it. Montana is slightly more purple here because, interestingly, Montana is the only state that we found that fully maintains and updates statewide parcel layer that it makes freely available statewide. That's updated very quickly. Might have something to do with that a lot of the state is open land that has not been modified from the original U.S. land survey going back to starting in the late 1700s. In addition to making the parcels all available with as much information about ownership and assessor information as we can, we're trying to take the surveying component that allowed us to do Motor City Mapping in Detroit and turn that into something that anybody can do in the country, in their state, in their city, in their neighborhood, to start and structure this information about what is on every property, what is the land use, what is the condition of housing in certain areas, and do that by leaning on Google Street View. So for example, here I am in the online surveying interface right now. We're in Utah somewhere, and so I'm seeing on the left-hand side here, I'm seeing Google Street View, and on the right-hand side, I'm seeing the parcel that we've imported here. So if I spin my Street View, I'll see my little Google Pegman turn, so I can more or less know when I'm pointed in the right direction here. And you'll see on the right side there's a question: is there a structure on the parcel? So in this case, the answer is yes. And then there's questions, a series of questions to fill out describing kind of like a choose your own adventure depending on what your answer is. New questions: what's the structure's use? So in this case, it's residential. It's a house. It's a single-family home. Does the structure have any signs of deterioration or damage? No, it does not. Does it appear to be occupied? Yep, it appears to be occupied. And if I wanted to, I could type in any sort of additional notes or tags here, or upload any additional photography. And if not, if I'm all good to go, I submit the survey, and then that gets saved into a national parcel database. All the information gets tagged and added to that property the same way that it does in Motor City Mapping in Detroit. And then you move on to the next property in either within the same area if you choose to survey a city or a neighborhood, or it takes you to sort of like it's like a American property roulette, I guess you'd say. Where are we now? We're in San Antonio, Texas. So if I want to get a better view at this property here, I can drag my little Pegman around here, turn this way and say, yep, it's another structure. Same. It's a single-family house. Nope. Damage, occupied. And further, showing how you can use this, to work on filling out a community or neighborhood. Here we are back in Detroit, right? So Detroit's a good example here since we have many more data layers in Detroit. It's kind of a neat example of how the depth to which we can build this out and add more data sets to a place. So in Detroit, not only do we have every parcel, but we have all the ownership information for every parcel. So if I wanted to, let's go down, pick a reasonably sized neighborhood here. If I wanted to look at ownership information in the North Rosedale Park neighborhood, then I can say, okay, I want to see everything in this particular neighborhood that's owned by the Detroit Land Bank Authority. Way to get down to just these properties, and then the ability to pull up and take a look at the, let's see, I was going to be a jerk on my connection right now, but pull up the, which should be loading here on the side is the, just like Motor City Mapping, the most recent photograph of the property, the assessment information, et cetera. And then if I want to download information or export information from an area, I have easy access to do that, pull it all down as a CSV, and do my thing with it. And we also capture in Detroit, we've got everything from zoning, property taxes, ages of buildings, recently demolished buildings, land bank auctions, property tax payment information in distress. This is always a really compelling view of who is behind on their taxes right now. In Detroit, it's unfortunately it's another other in a series of kind of overwhelming views that's hard to even get your mind around, but is important to be able to see if you're trying to understand what's happening in a city or a neighborhood, and what's happening to the economic distress of people, housing distress, upcoming signs that there's going to be a problem, that maybe somebody's at risk of foreclosure, et cetera. And if I wanted to survey a property just in Detroit, any level that you are at here, let me go back to ownership information. Any level that you're at, so I could, if I was in Chicago and I just wanted to survey Chicago, or if I was in El Paso and I just wanted to survey El Paso, or a particular neighborhood in those places, I can just say survey this place. And then the properties that it's going to show me to survey are only properties in that particular city. So, I'll talk real quick about advantages and disadvantages here. When we sent 150 surveyors to visit every property in Detroit, they literally visited every single property in Detroit with a tablet, and it was a highly coordinated, complicated logistical event. It was expensive because it was good. It was nice to be able to pay people to survey their own city and to be a part of this project. It added an element of community engagement to it. But also, and the information that was collected was incredibly fresh, because it was literally somebody being there and being able to see what it looks like today. Here's a good example on the screen of a property that is open to trespass. So residential structure, single-family home. Does the structure have any signs of deterioration or damage? Yes, it does. Is the structure fire damaged? Doesn't look like it's fire damaged from here, so I'll say no on this. It's open to trespass. Is there any trash or dumping on the property? It looks like the windows are broken out and some of the glass is hanging there. So I'm going to say some trash. Overall condition, I'm going to describe, since we tend to lean towards describing the structural condition of the site, somebody might call this a poor property because it's open to the elements. I'm going to call it fair right here and mark out that it's vacant and submit it. So obviously one of the positive trade-offs of surveying in this fashion is that you can do it incredibly quickly. You can do it in your sweatpants. You can do it. You could have people survey. It's fast. It takes maybe 20 seconds per property when you're cooking, unless there's something to that catches you that you really need to think about or wonder about, or you need to play with the angle of your street view and move around your pegman guy. But otherwise, it's a very fast way to build out a Motor City Mapping style view of land use, occupancy, and condition information. And I'll show you part of the interface here. So this is, we've tried to make it as, and again, this is brand new, so not that many people even know that this exists right now. So it's mostly for internal use at the moment. But you can see this is sort of the live feed of every property that's been surveyed in this method. And actually see the properties this is the one that I just surveyed on Google Street View. So that's in the feed. When there's other people using it, you can actually see the survey results pop in live on here. So there's sort of a live map of showing where people are surveying. And we're not totally there today, but very shortly we'll be in a position that for citywide and statewide and nationwide, we can do something that's very similar to how you see it in Motor City Mapping, where where I could say in Florida, I want to see every single-family residential unit that appears to be open to trespass, and boom, some number of properties are going to appear on here. And as the survey happens more widely across the entire country, that'll of course take on a whole slew of different kinds of land uses. It's not all, as you get into more rural areas, there's things like forests and farms and other kind of concerns. But how we had started, and I think how what this group cares about in housing, is a lot about what are the conditions of our cities, how do we show what the conditions of housing are in different areas, how do we take that information, make it powerful and visually compelling in a way that we can share to our funders, to our constituents, to people, to both motivate them emotionally, and then of course also motivate them financially and strategically and all the other ways that are possible and necessary in order to get good stuff done. And so to back up on it for a second, the arc of the story is we have this wonderful project going in Detroit, trying to keep an updated database of property conditions, photography, and associated parcel data as up to date as possible. Working with a number of local partners to do that, and then now attempting to do something crazy and ambitious out of it, like, can we put every property in the country online? Can we do, we've been calling the Great American Parcel Survey, sort of playing on this idea of, this original foundational land survey in the United States of America, where everything was sort of originally parceled. Is it time now? Is it possible now to sort of do that again and see what America looks like today by taking advantages of all these, almost overwhelmingly magical new tools, leaning on Google Street View, leaning on the ability that we're all on a common communication network, leaning on the fact that it's possible to store all this information. And then before I'll stop talking, the last thing I'll say on this, and we're trying to become more helpful to block clubs, nonprofits, real estate developers, municipal governments, programs of the types that you all represent, of how can we go from a really cool database of all of this, all this information out there publicly and free and available to all, which is really helpful, but go that next level as well and say, okay, if you are in a line of work or have a project where you want to conduct your own survey with your own questions, or you have your own parcel data, or you have your own project or plan that, while it might not even be top secret, you don't really feel comfortable sharing with everybody right now, so you'd like to work on it yourself or with your team, and then sort of selectively publish maps and data sets when you're ready to do that. We've developed a program called Site Control, which is sort of like, the easiest way to say it is like a Google document suite for parcel information. So it's like you get your own account, and then you have access to every parcel that Loveland shows, and you can make your own little private world and invite people into it if you want, and import and export data, make your own survey questions, survey from Google Street View or survey from the mobile phone app, and then if and when you want to, selectively publish the link or make your own survey questions. So the site control system is actually exactly what Motor City Mapping runs on, which is kind of neat. It's so you can see this is sort of the interface. It's similar to the makeloveland.com, but it has some additional things here. So this is like my own little private, world and account with membership settings and administration and whatnot. And I can make a map and name it whatever I want. It's not Friday morning anymore, so I can call this, Wednesday afternoon, and I can say, do I want to keep this map private or make it so anyone with a link can see it? Do I want to make a survey? If so, what kind of questions do I want to use? If I want to have a survey about, surveys can be anything. Let's see, could this property be improved? Yes, no, whatever answers, maybe it could be. Let's see, like, does this space have public use? Could art go here? Could, is it am I conducting a survey of people in homes to ask questions? We actually, in Detroit, we just finished, we'll probably do more of it, but we just sort of finished a big phase of trying to find out who is actually going through tax foreclosure in the city. Now that we've got a much better handle on how many occupants and all this stuff. So we actually use this system to help manage survey information by, almost a door knocking campaign, talking to people in person. So it was not just surveying the condition of the property, but surveying the condition of the person in the property. I guess it's sort of an awkward way to say it, but a reasonable way to say it. So, so we all are also building tools where hopefully we can figure out how to be very useful to people who have projects and surveys and data of their own that they want to manipulate and have a very user-friendly, attractive, sort of modern tool for doing that. So I think with all that, I'm going to shut up. I did my thing where I intended to be shorter than I was, so hopefully I wasn't too long. And hopefully the webinar is actually, you guys can hear me, and that I wasn't embarrassingly talking to myself and myself alone for the last 15 minutes.
Don't worry, we're recording it, so if you were just talking to yourself, you can listen to you talk to yourself later.
But
no, that was great, Jerry. This is Ethan again. I know we already have one question in the question box, so yay, following directions, very appreciated. We're going to try, this is from Jen Leonard. I'm going to try and have Rebecca unmute you so you can ask your question yourself, Jen. So.
Like a Pink Floyd album.
Yeah. It's a really old Doctor Who.
So Jen, okay, we may have an audio. We're going to mute Jen again, and I will ask her question on her behalf. So the first question she has up there is one that was occurring to me too. If someone updates information in the database, right? They're out there, whether they're doing it with shoe leather or whether they're doing it through Google Maps. Do you save that information so you can see change over time, right? When the database changes, do you have the old information archived, or is it just sort of the real-time slice?
Yeah, we do, and I'll talk because there's it's a great question, and I didn't really get back to talk more about, like, the power of saving things over time and being able to see things over time, which is something that we're still trying to get better at as well. But we save all the changes that are submitted to the database. In Detroit, with the Motor City Mapping Project, we're fortunate that we've actually been able to hire about 10 surveyor / quality control folks, we call them, who what they do is their job is a mix of actually going out into the field to collect new property information. So these are the folks that, when they listen to the fire scanner, they go out and they visit the properties that have had change. They're on call if the land bank or the building authority or another city department says, hey, we're doing a project in this area, would you please be so kind as to go and resurvey, these 200 properties, because we need fresh information before we do something, before we try to sell or before we try to demo or before we try to X, and they'll go out and do it. And they'll also review contributions from the public. So,
okay.
And we get a range of kinds of contributions. Like some people use the app, some people understandably just send emails in, they'll report property problems to us via email, in which case would try to have somebody as speedily as possible go out and take a look at what they're talking about. And so there is a set of eyeballs on all contributions, which is great because it's like, sort of a customer support for keeping things fresh. More change happens than we can fully keep up with, which I just think is sort of the nature of the beast right now. We're trying to get better at it. It's still, we have a system where it's possible to update everything all the time, but it's still, still really challenging to do that. And there is a feature. It's not. I guess it's not on the site right now. It's funny. We have it. We've had it on and then we've taken it off, and I think it might be on a secret internal link that I can't, secret in quotes, I guess, like a work site, where one of the options on the site is, it says overview, explore, Blex, and then it also says changes. And what changes is if you press the changes button, you actually see everything that's been resurveyed differently in this area over time, with kind of a color-coded indicator of like whether it was a positive or a negative change. And the positive and negative changes are defined very simply by like, if there was a property that was said it was in poor condition and now it's in good condition, that's a positive change. If it went from fire damage to, or if it went from good condition to fire damage, that would be negative change. If it went from good condition to fire damage back to good condition, that would be negative then a positive change. If it went, there could be some edge cases around if there's a house there and then it's gone, is it a positive or not? In some cases it's a positive, right? If it was a, if it was a suggest demolition house to a vacant lot, then that would be reflected as a positive change. Though of course, there's nuance in all data, to make that obviously. So being able to see these factors and track them over time, one way I've talked about it with the whole crew working on it, or how I like to think about it, is sort of like making Detroit the movie, in a way. I mean, it sounds a little, it sounds a little silly to say, because we're not used to being able to do that. Because I laugh. One thing I talk about a lot with this, I feel like a lot of these concepts that we're really pushing hard on, there are things that it's like, of course you would like to be able to do this stuff, but they'd never really been possible before. So it's like one of these things that you never really think about. Like, it'd be awesome if you could teleport to Tokyo or London or somewhere interesting whenever you wanted to. But since you can't, you don't ever think about it. It'd be crazy to think about it. But there are many new things that are possible when it comes to tracking and understanding and visualizing our cities that were sort of as crazy as, like, do you want to teleport to Tokyo? But they're now like possible, because you can do, as an example, I mean, there's no reason why a fresh high-resolution aerial flyover and street view of Detroit doesn't happen every single year, and the surveyors update it, and it's put into sort of an animated, film view of sorts. And what you're watching every year is you're watching positive and negative changes in Detroit, and you're seeing the city grow and shrink and ebb and flow and change in a variety of different ways. And in that sense, it is like capturing a movie of urban development and how things are actually playing out, apart from rhetoric and press releases and wishes and stereotypes and assumptions, which is, those are all the things we still have to work with mostly, because that's how, we can't have perfect knowledge. But there's I think as things move into the future, it's sort of like, you know, and nationwide kind of thing, you know, it's like America the movie, you know, on its land use level. So sorry, I just talked for a long time again, and I drifted from off of the question piece. But the moral is, yeah, the time dimension is, while we don't have a way to like press play right now, it's definitely something in our path. And we've also done some work with some folks that are the interesting fields, spatial econometrics. I'm not an expert at it, but it's the sort of emerging science, statistical science of trying to record as much time series data at the parcel level as possible, and then looking for correlations about how parcels affect adjacent parcels, and being able to, at least crudely or at some level, kind of project, if this happens here, it's likely to have this effect on neighboring things, you know, over this time period. So.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think this speaks to when we were preparing this webinar, and when I would mention to folks on our board or others that I was talking to, hey, there's this company that has a nearly real-time parcel-level database of an entire city. Their eyes would just get wide, and I think it's what you're talking about, that they're starting to realize something we didn't think was possible is possible, and what could that do? So one quick follow-up question I see from Jen Leonard on here was whether people can export the data, and I think that's what the download CSV button is for, right?
Yep, totally. So here's an example. I probably should have showed this earlier. Forgive me. I get in my zone. But you know, here's like a common search for in Detroit. So this is for, you know, you're the city or the land bank, and in this area, you're trying to get a sense of what your universe, what your cosmos is of all publicly owned properties here. So I say, in the Brightmoor neighborhood, I want to see every residential structure that is publicly owned by either the city, the land bank, Detroit Public Schools, the county. I'll just, you know, click them all manner of public ownership here, and apply it. This will actually probably have to think for a second, because there's a lot of parcels in Brightmoor here. But yeah, when it stops doing its calculations, the download CSV button here will give you the just the, you know, spreadsheet with a parcel ID, the owner, the condition, all the assessment information, just for those properties that you've highlighted on here, which is really cool, because I think that's one thing we try to be very aware of with this system, is that everybody has their own workflow. You know, a lot of the departments that we work with have their own GIS practitioners, so they'll use other tools. They'll use, you know, ArcGIS or various kinds of Esri or other products. And so as long as we can import and export things, like basically at the end of the day, everything turns into a spreadsheet for at least a second, right? And so making it easy to pull that down so that people can manipulate it in a way that they're familiar with is built into all the stuff that we do. And that's, you know, I think I'm in Detroit. I don't know where Detroit is right now, but you can, you know, I'm in Montana right now. So for the county here, if I wanted the list view, you know, of all these parcels here, I can look at it as a list. You know, it'll probably take a while on this page, and then download the CSV. You know, we don't have a ton of stuff here, but owner, parcel data, address, and then you can download the CSV here, and that'll pull down everything for that county in Montana. You know, and then joining it with the parcel ID, you can do whatever fun things you want to do with it for, you know, for research purposes or planning purposes.
Well, I think that's powerful flexibility. I will say one place my brain goes to as I hear you talk through this is there are, especially in affordable housing, a number of entities that potentially could contribute data to this. And I'm wondering if you connected with HUD or USDA or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or right, to link up, I think, to this.
So this was the question that I had for all you guys. Is I want to make it very clear that we've from our side, and I also want to make it. I don't want to make it sound like this is like a, you know, overly kind of, you know, amateur hour thing. But honestly, we sort of backed into this whole world and fell in love with it. Have found it endlessly interesting. very important, but outside of a couple people on the team who went to school for urban planning or who came in through housing studies, a lot of us are just kind of like, we don't fully understand this landscape yet. And so there's like names and groups that always come up, and we're sort of awkwardly trying to figure out how to be as useful as we possibly can be. But we don't always speak the same language on stuff, and I feel like sometimes when I get excited about things and I'll just talk, oh, and then we're going to map every property in the country, I feel like I accidentally talk over people's heads who are trying to do very like practical, straightforward things, where if I just shut up for a minute and listen more, I could go, oh, we could totally help you like next week. So it's another long way of saying, like, we would love to be a better part of this world, but we haven't talked, frankly, or I don't feel like we've gotten, like, I would love, for example, I don't see why we wouldn't be working on, like, the American Community Survey stuff, or the American Housing Survey, or helping HUD nationwide kind of visualize data sets and invite people to contribute information. I think it's just a matter of time and relationships, and we would like to, but we have not really developed many relationships outside of Detroit yet.
We should talk more, and because I think there are members of this group, I think we can potentially be a bridge here where, I just know that, for instance, Fannie Mae has got to have databases that, at least in theory, could be linked up as a layer on this.
Right.
When I think about, I don't know if I'm sure you've looked at Policy Map before and how they've built
Sure.
layers. They're not necessarily parcel level, but it feels like there's a lot of overlays that could be connected here in useful ways. As you say, to get both the over time change and the spatial differentiation in all this land use and the patterns of how we live together and separately. So I'm happy to help you there, and I'm hoping folks here on the call will be inspired as well. Are there more questions in the box? Not yet. Okay. So,
Can I ask one?
Yeah, Chris has a question.
Sure. Thanks again for being on the call today. We really enjoyed seeing your stuff in Detroit and excited to share it with the committee. I was curious, as you guys have looked at expanding this to other states, and when the first thing that comes to mind when I think about having access to something like this is the ability to actually monitor housing quality, which is probably the least monitored recorded thing in most states and most municipalities in the country, unless you've got a Detroit-like situation where people recognize it's a huge crisis, and so there's a real need to do it. I'm curious, as you guys have expanded, has that issue come up either pro or con? Some people don't want that information out because they feel like it's going to lead to code enforcement or pointing out what they're not doing or not. And so I was curious how that conversation has gone as you guys have spread out from Detroit.
I can only sort of speak to it from what we've experienced in Detroit so far, because, and again, we're so new. Like, I mean, we're trying to put together this national parcel layer. There's just sort of a fun one on the screen right now, just to call out. This is all the federally owned land in the U.S. It's just kind of a neat one to see, which I had never seen mapped before anywhere. But the, as far as these issues, like, do people want the information out? What are the concerns on that? I know in Detroit, very interestingly, I feel like that conversation has largely been settled for the moment, that even folks who were kind of skeptical about, like, for example, I think one common concern that people have are concerns about gentrification, where if you show housing information or show property information and you put it out into a format like the internet, where there are digital divide issues that are very real, even though I think they're closing, more rapidly than some people expect, but are also probably still ingrained bigger than some others would like to expect. That the ability to actually see who's purchasing properties, who owns stuff, where the city is selling properties and has properties, outweighs the concerns, because the way that I think about it is, a lot of the professional real estate developer or speculator or whomever has more capital or resources to do something is sort of already playing in this world, is able to pay to assemble a lot of this information themselves, and is already acting. You're just not seeing it being acted on. And so there is a big leveling of the playing field that comes from kind of having it all out there and letting the next evolution happen. On the code enforcement side, I do think it's an amazing question. I think it's simple. It's a question that reminds me of like automated speeding tickets or automated the light turns red and you go through it as it's turning red and you get a ticket in the mail or something like that. I think there's lots of fascinating issues because nobody seems to like to just support those very much because they're almost like, what, you have to be able to live in a world with some flexibility. What happens when the instinct is for a municipality to before you were just kind of left to do your thing and you were okay, and then it was just like, what, now that I'm getting a blight ticket every few weeks because some knucklehead with a cell phone said that I have peeling paint. It's certainly not our intent to go there, but if that's what you're kind of inferring, like where are the issues, I think the positives definitely outweigh the negatives here, but I think like any sort of change in your awareness, suddenly being able to see all this stuff, I hate to use the D word of disruptive. At the least, it causes some new questions because it's almost like everybody has new superpowers, right? If your business is to ticket people for stuff, you have new superpowers to see you could use a ticket. If you're a neighbor in the neighborhood improvement business and you're trying to hold absentee property owners accountable and do cleanup days and point out properties that need to be worked on, you have new superpowers. And everybody who works on property stuff has new superpowers, and so there'll probably be some amount of flexing and what's perceived as overshooting stuff. I worry about it a lot in Detroit because you have a community that it's an economically distressed city, obviously, and I feel like there's a pattern, there's sort of a social moray about property upkeep sometimes where things are not detrimental to the community. They don't bother anybody. In fact, sometimes something that is and be careful what I say because I don't want to give the wrong impression of this, but something that's not perfect has a charm and has something that gives character to a place. But it would be quite possible to prove that, yes, somebody should, because of however some regulation was written. That we have that in Detroit with urban farming. It's probably a great example on that. And so I know there's a lot of tensions. Hopefully people can be rational and sort these things out. That as more information comes to the front, the information isn't used to take something that people are enjoying and doesn't hurt anybody and turn into a ticket trap. So I don't know. It's a great question. It's something to be thoughtful about. I think if we didn't think that it was a positive thing overall, we wouldn't be working on it. But not so much of a zealot about it. Not to say that there aren't things to think through.
Thanks.
Got it. So let me do one last call for questions from the group because we have a little bit of time. I don't see any in the box. So if you have a last question for Jerry, stick your hand up. But know that Rebecca will send around notes probably later this week after the call. We'll have a link to the Make Loveland site. We'll have a link to the recording of this discussion so you can go back or send it to other folks who want to hear about it. Jerry, do you mind if we send your contact information if folks have follow-up questions?
No, it's fine. It's probably the easiest thing. I'm Jerry, Jerry at makeloveland.com, and
okay.
And motorcitymapping.org and makeloveland.com are the sites, and they're just fun to play with. I can just shut up and you can just surf them. Get an idea and think about what would be useful. Oh yeah, no,
I find them magnetic. They're really cool. And I think there really is a lot of potential for change here. I want to do two things now. First, I want to say thank you again to Jerry because this was fascinating, and I think there's room for lots of follow-up. But then I also want to open up the floor to the folks at Enterprise and LISC and NeighborWorks are there, so with us in case they have any announcements, because I didn't make as much space at the top of the hour as I should have, and I want to make sure that if there are updates you want to share. So we'll start with, I saw Allison's up at the top of the list. Why don't you unmute her and just see if you have anything you want to share.
Hey, Ethan. I actually don't think we have a lot of updates to give right now.
Okay.
But I'll be sure to share next month if there's something to share.
Yep, no problem. Just want to make sure that the floor was open. Then I thought I saw Jessica.
Yeah, I think she's on her computer.
Okay. So Jessica, it looks like we're not able to unmute you to share, and I didn't see anyone from NeighborWorks. So with that, I think we have covered our updates. We learned a ton about the ability to map properties in Detroit and hopefully nationally. Jerry, I'd love to talk with you further so we can try and find ways to get some of those additional uses and more data layers and just more reach to this, because it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
And thank you. So with that, I'm going to give you all back 18 minutes of your day, and thank you for joining us on the webinar. Look for more to come next week. And also, if you haven't seen the announcements, look for announcements about the NHC Gala, because that is coming up in June, and it's featuring 2 places of comprehensive community development where a bunch of folks have come together. One in Ohio, where it's been impressive multifamily and community and property level redevelopment involving a whole lot of different folks, and also the Piece by Piece initiative in Atlanta, which really has focused on the foreclosure crisis and about mobilizing the community in many ways to get involved and make change. So.
And one other quick announcement from Jen Leonard. The Center for Community Progress has their Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference in Detroit, May 19th through 21st, and you can still early register until April 10th.
Yes.
And you can register after that, but you won't get the discount. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and register soon.
Yep, and that's a good reminder. That looks like a great event. We're hopeful that someone from NHC can be out there for it, and I hope all of you can do so as well. And again, watch for stuff about the gala, June 11th and 12th. And if any of you are going to be out in Seattle next week, you can still do last-minute registration for our forum on communication, specifically for overcoming NIMBYism. So you can see all about that at nhc.org. And again, thank you all for joining us. And Jerry, thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.